Welcome to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals New and Improved podcast series featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration. Welcome back to podcast number 3 of the MASSP Principals podcast. I'm here this week with Tammy Jackson, Associate Director of MASSP, and we are talking about the Principals Checklist. So if you don't know, MASSP puts out a principals checklist every month, and they are fantastic. And I think over the last couple of years, before I remember printing them out and writing on them, but they've gotten really, really nice in the last year or so. So I'm going to have Tammy kind of jump in and talk about the purpose of it and when they come out. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's on the March and the April checklists.
Sure. Thanks, Theresa. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. Every month, MASSP publishes the principals checklists, and you are absolutely correct. We did a major overhaul of the checklists. At first new look went out, I believe, in August of 2017. And so we've had really great feedback from our members about how much more usable these checklists are.
Yeah, they look great. I loved before, it was nice. You could download them, you could check them off, and they were in portrait mode, but now they're landscape, and you can put, I'm looking at it now, you can put who it's assigned to and what date it's due, and you can check it off as done all electronically. And I just think that it is so much more user friendly this time.
I'm glad to hear that feedback. We're going to actually talk tonight a little bit about the March and the April checklist. With the timing of spring breaks and such, I think it's just timely that we talk about both those things, because you're either getting ready to go to spring break, or when you come back from spring break, you'll be well into April. So I think we'll check both these things off our list tonight.
Sounds perfect.
Well, at MASSP, we recognize the incredible weight of the job of a principal, and we're always looking for ways to try and do some of that heavy lifting for them and to serve our members in any way we can to make their job easier. So if a member principal would take a look at these checklists when they come out at the beginning of each month, they can literally just scan through it. And for the most part, they're probably doing all these things, but they may come across one thing that they haven't planned for. And that one little tickler that we might put out could really save them a lot of grief.
Absolutely.
So, in the month of March, we kind of call it IEP season. And we do that because we know that we're now down to crunch time, because honestly, when you come back from spring break, it's just a treadmill to try and get everything done before school's out. And with award ceremonies and everything that goes on, time flies so fast. And so I always, as a principal, asked my special ed teachers to put out a schedule for the IEPs that were left remaining for the rest of the year. And that helped me get them on my calendar and make sure that I had the staff that was attending those IEPs together and substitutes and such. So it's really a good time to just meet with that special ed staff and say, all right, let's take a look at what we have between now and the end of the year.
Great call.
We can't ignore, however, that while April is actually the testing month, we know that all the work for testing has to be done well before April.
Yes,
so, and again, depending on when your spring break is, you might be coming back from spring break literally the day before you start your spring testing. And I just really encourage people to just really get that schedule in place and do a lot of the work before you leave. So if you don't leave for spring break until next week, which would mean that you would come back a day or so before the testing, I would even go as far as to have my room set up, all my signage up. So when you come back that morning, you are not running around trying to get all that stuff together.
That's a great point. Last year, our spring break fell the first week in April, and we came back the first full week of April. And I believe we came back the day before all the testing started. And it was really tough. It's tough for the students, and it's really tough for those who are planning and organizing. So I think that's a really great thought, is to have the room set up before you leave. Then you don't need to worry about it over the break, and you don't have to worry about coming back to it.
Absolutely. And actually have your students help you. We would always say that last 15 minutes, that last day before spring break, we would literally ask students to pick up their desks and walk them to where we needed them to be. It just saved an incredible amount of time for our staff as well.
Sure, absolutely. And looking at if you don't have the checklist in front of you while you're listening to this, Tammy, we're looking at the checklist, and under the testing schedules, you have some resources and documents that are linked within each of these to-dos. Can you talk a little bit about what you have linked for the testing schedules?
Sure. If you go to any of our to-do lists, you will see that there are links that go directly to whatever resources we have. Takes you to some Google Docs, and just really with the testing, it would remind you of all the necessary dates and some of the links to some of the just some of the information that you probably already have at hand, but maybe just want to access it really quickly through us. So again, when you upload or download this checklist electronically, then those links are live, obviously. You can go directly to them.
Sure. Great.
Yeah. So we don't have time to obviously cover every single thing on the checklist, but so there's many more things in March than we're going to really deal with.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, though, I know that takes place really toward the end of March and then really heavily in April is that whole schedule piece. Yes. That whole piece about how are we going to get our students registered for classes and start to determine what teachers are going to teach and what we need, and really should be forecasting that out beginning in March. I think most schools do their heavy registration in February and early March. So by the end of March, you should be able to really create your matrix of this is what courses I need, this is how many sections I need, and at least have all that stuff plotted out so that when you start the scheduling process, you have all your information right in front of you.
Yes, yes, yes. That is definitely the beast of March. There's no question about that. And there are a lot of great tips on this checklist too about getting things prepared for staff scheduling too, different rules to follow. Really, really a good resource, especially if you're not comfortable or if you're new to scheduling or the master schedule process.
Absolutely. And if I can just throw one more piece of advice in here when it comes to scheduling, one of the things that I always recommend principals do every couple of years is you should actually make sure that you have plotted out and understand everything that every teacher can teach. Because I think at times we have teachers teaching the same thing over and over and over, and we actually start losing track of what else they could teach if we needed them to. So I think it's always a great idea to revisit that within the MOAC site if you don't have it in print, and just look at what all your teachers can teach, because sometimes knowing that is really going to help fill a void that you're not sure how to fill.
That's really a good point, because you don't realize, and especially with subjects that have odd certifications like science, where your certifications may not cover all of the sciences that need to be taught. That's a really great document to have set up and ready to go. And two, we talked a lot this year about maybe looking at having some of your advanced teachers who teach, the Calc 2 or Calc 3 classes, having them teach one of the beginner classes and getting your newer students or incoming students familiar with those teachers as well. Because sometimes we have teachers who are teaching the advanced classes for so long that our younger students don't have the opportunity to experience them as much too. So, things to talk to your staff about, if that's something that they're interested in. If you've got a large staff, there might be somebody who wants to, jump down and take one of the lower level classes.
Right. So we should always be looking for opportunities to challenge our staff and challenge them, of course, by including them in that challenge. But sometimes you can become stagnant when you just teach the same thing over and over. And there's sometimes it's just best to shake things up a little bit and move people around to teach different things every once in a while. So Absolutely. Knowing what people can teach is really the key to that.
Mm-hmm. What about transition planning?
That's just another thing that takes place in the spring. And while it doesn't typically happen in March, and actually sometimes not till the end of April, certainly you should be thinking about what are you going to do to prepare those students coming into your building. For secondary buildings, high school building, it's typically the incoming freshmen. But if you're in a middle school, you're probably having incoming sixth graders, or depending on how your school is structured. But you should always be thinking about how you can make that transition process smooth so that your kids and your kids' parents are ready for that transition.
Yes, especially the parents. I think that my children are at a transition age right now. And even being in the district where my kids are going to school, I'm still struggling with parts of the transition, just knowing what's coming next. If it's something that you're not familiar with, especially if it's a first parent. We have a lot of, I'm at obviously the high school level, and a lot of the freshman parents that we have coming in, freshman parents who are first time high school parents. There's a lot to that. So being aware of their thoughts and parent anxiety as well.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say that sometimes it's taking care of the parents is more important than the students. I think students are pretty resilient, but I think their parents worry a lot.
That's true and totally fair.
Yeah,
totally
absolutely. Fair. Absolutely. And then at the end of every one of our checklists, we have some things that we offer for staff icebreakers. Some of the celebrations that take place during the month of the checklist. And those things are always at the last part of the checklist. So I encourage principals to take a look at that and see if they can glean anything from any of those, including what we call your own reflection. And that's a time when we sort of unveil something that is currently taking place in education, and we sort of challenge our principals to look into it and sort of get a leading edge of what's going on with a particular issue.
That's new too, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's really nice. That's a great, so much time we talk about reflection and evaluation of our own practices. And this is really nice. If you're, once again, if you're not looking right at it, there's a description of something that's new, and then a couple questions to really challenge your thinking, even write reflections on. If you're someone who enjoys blogging, these are really fantastic and a great way to end a checklist, I think, and with, after the professional development and everything that's coming with it. So really, really a great job.
It is. And we try and do the work for the principal. So we know there's so much reading out there and you only have so much time. So we try and do the reading and the research and try and condense it down so that it's much more easy for, for our membership to read it and learn about it.
Great. So let's jump up to April. So normally when we receive these checklists, Tammy, what part the April checklist we received through our MASSP email probably a week and a half ago, maybe? Does that sound right?
Yeah, typically you would receive in the last week of a month, the next month's checklist.
Perfect. And
because of the spring break issues, we published April's a little bit early.
That's great. And we're going to try through these podcasts to jump into one of the checklists, the next month's checklist during the last podcast of the prior month. So we'll be able to walk through them with you. But let's take a look at April and see what we have to do once we get back from break.
Well, April's is pretty big. So I'm going to just hit some of the most important parts and just trust that principals will take a look at the entire checklist for their purposes.
Perfect.
Obviously, observations are the evaluation system. If you haven't scheduled out or completed all your observations when you come back from spring break, you don't have much time to get those done. And so I think that you should really just make it a commitment to look at where you are with observations and put them on a calendar and stick to that calendar so that by the end of April, you are done with observations and can start writing those final evaluations.
Great.
Yeah. And then, of course, remember that 25% of the evaluation has to include multiple measures of student growth. Mm-hmm. 75% of the evaluation really talking about teachers' practice on the particular tool that they chose to use. And we know that those numbers will change next year, but for this year, it is 25 and 75%.
Okay. And you've got evaluation resources linked here under that too. And what would we find on that page for the evaluation resources?
Well, you'll just find links to the actual laws so that you can remind yourself specifically what you're looking at.
Okay.
We can't really give links to every single tool. And so the links are just more generic about the law itself.
Great.
Right. And then continuing on in the month of April with that whole staffing issue and continuing to move forward with looking at your staffing needs. With today's climate of hiring, and not having the number of teachers that we need to hire, I just encourage you to get on the leading edge of looking for new staff and not wait until June is over before you start looking for staff for the fall. I think that there was a time in education when you could do that, but that time is not right now. You need to know who you need to hire, and you need to get on that as early as you possibly can in the spring.
Yes. And yeah, as soon as you know there's an opening, or even if you're moving staff around, making sure that you've got that information as quickly as possible so you know exactly what you're hiring for.
Absolutely. And then at the high school level, you're trying to wrap up the year when thinking about commencement and all the things that involve seniors. We included lots of those things in this checklist. Just remember that while this might be your 10th, your 15th, your 30th graduation as a principal, it is most of your students and their families' first graduation. And you can't ever forget that, how important that is to them. And you need to over-communicate with the parents of seniors. As a matter of fact, always this time of year, I would do a one-page dates. Here are the dates you need to know between now and the end of the year. They have a lot of anxiety, and they're anxious, and they're happy, but they just want to make sure that they're not forgetting anything when it comes to their child's graduation.
Yes, over communication. Our principal at the high school says all the time that communication is the key to less stress.
That's right. Absolutely, it is. And you know when you've done a good job communicating because your phone's not ringing off the hook. So that's really good to do. And then again, we have your own reflection, and really it deals this month or the month of April with school safety. And of course, having had another school shooting again today, just really reminds us the importance of taking that school safety so important. It's serious. Take it seriously and practice it and revisit it and do all your due diligence to make sure that the students and staff in your building are as safe as you possibly can make them.
And that they feel as safe. Don't you think that's as much a part of it? I found just since the Florida shooting that the more our students have the ability to have the conversations and ask the questions, the better the climate is, because they feel like they know what's happening.
Absolutely. And that's really a large part of it, is just making sure that people are feeling safe. And sometimes you just have to let them know all the measures you have in place so that they know you really do have a plan in case you ever have to use it.
So with that, thank you so much for walking us through these checklists. I really, really am a fan of the new format and all of the things that you've added to it. It's extremely helpful, and it's a professional development resource in and of itself now. So thank you for all the work that you and the team have done with that.
No problem, Theresa. And in the future, when we are only doing one checklist during a podcast, we'll have some more time to talk about more specifics in the checklist, including some of the resources that are accessible through the links.
Sure. This is a good overview, though, of what people can expect when they look through it. And be sure to grab those links, too. I know we'll add them to the blog post when they go out, when this episode goes out. So looking ahead, we are going to talk about the craziness that comes with spring break and everything from here on out, because it is downhill from here. There's nothing slow, and there's not a whole lot of time between now and the end of the school year. So we're going to jump into that, preparing for state assessments and getting ready for the end of the school year. So once again, Tammy, thank you so much, Associate Director of MASSP. Thank you for joining us and for walking us through these great revamped checklists. And I know we will be talking to you again in the future.
That's great, Theresa. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to podcasts in the future.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.